Okay, hello and welcome to photo presentation 1 for Florida's upland ecosystems. Our first ecosystem was the pine flatwoods and the dry prairie combined. Here in this photo you can see the landscape, which is relatively flat with very little trees but dense shrub covering. Okay, starting off with my plant species for this ecosystem, first I have the longleaf pine, or Pinus palustris. Here we can see the longleaf pine and the long needles on it. I also have a photo of the cone to show how large it is. The longleaf pines once dominated the Florida landscape, however their numbers have significantly decreased due to logging and fire exclusion in the ecosystem. My next plant species is the wiregrass, or Aristida stricta. This grass is covering most of the ground in this ecosystem. It also serves as a major food source for the gopher tortoise. My next plant species is the dwarf live oak, or the Quercus minima. The dwarf live oak reproduces and grows through seeds as well as rhizomes under the ground. This allows the plant to spread across the landscape and grow low to the ground. Next up is another super common plant of this ecosystem. It's the saw palmetto, or Serenoa repens. This covers most of the ground in this ecosystem. The berries of the saw palmetto are often harvested as they are believed to have medicinal properties and are used in dietary supplements. Next is the gallberry plant, or the Ilex glabra. This is another low-growing plant of the shrub layer of this ecosystem. Historically, the parts of this plant have had many uses. The leaves were used by Native Americans to brew tea, the berries, when ripe, can be used as a dark-colored dye, and the nectar is used to make a popular honey. Now moving into some of the wildflowers that I saw, this is rose rush, or roseweed, or Lygodesmia ephylla. This is a common wildflower in Florida. It is considered almost endemic, as the only other place it occurs is a few areas in Georgia, but other than that it occurs only in Florida. Here is the yellow stargrass, or Hypoxis hirsuta. Although this plant occurs in almost every state in the U.S., it is native to only a few states, one of which is Florida. The next wildflower that I saw, I identified as yellow milkwort, or Polygala rugeli. This is a wildflower that is endemic to the Florida Peninsula, so it doesn't really occur anywhere else other than this area. My next wildflower is more of a cluster of wildflowers. This is a shortleaf rose gentian, or the Sabbatia brevifolia. These wildflowers are most commonly found in moist flatwoods or savannas and can actually grow up to 3 feet tall, which is pretty tall for a wildflower. My last plant for this ecosystem I identified as the stinging nettle, or Nidoscalus stimulosus. Despite the name, this is not a true nettle, it is actually a perennial herb. Moving on to my animals for this ecosystem, first I have the gopher tortoise, or Gopherus polyphemus. Here in these photos we have the gopher tortoise burrow. Although tortoises are herbivores, they have been observed in the wild to eat the bones of dead animals as a source of calcium. My next animal is the milkweed assassin bug, or Zelus longipes. These are insects. They have a long straw-like appendage that allows them to pierce into their prey and then suck out the insides. Despite their name, these bugs are actually great at eating invasive, unwanted pests, so they're not necessarily an assassin in the bad way. They can actually be really helpful in gardens. And last but not least for my animals is the zebra swallowtail butterfly, or Eurytitus marcellus. I spent about 10 minutes chasing this butterfly around in the field trying to get the best pictures that I could, and this is what I ended up with. I think they're pretty good. A fun fact about this butterfly is that there is only one type of plant that can host the caterpillar, and that is of the pawpaw family, so these butterflies only occur where those plants are found. Moving forward into the next ecosystem, we have the Florida scrub. Here is one of my landscape photos. You can see, just like in the last ecosystem, this one also does not have very tall vegetation. It's pretty open in the upper levels. Here's another landscape photo just showing how dense the vegetation is at the shrub level. Here is another landscape photo. I really liked this one because it kind of showed the elevation change that happens in this ecosystem. Although it's not very severe, there is still the slight change, which makes a big difference in the types of vegetation that occur in the ecosystem. This was such a beautiful view. I really loved it. For my first plant species of this ecosystem, I have the scrub oak, which is super common in this ecosystem. This is the Quercus inopina. As you can see, the bottom part of the leaves is upturned. This is a characteristic that helps the oak tree to conserve water and moisture in the dry, sandy ecosystem that we have. You can see all the little blooms, the little flower blooms on this plant. I thought those were super interesting. I'd never seen anything like that. Next is another type of oak, the myrtle oak, or Quercus myrtifolia. This is another oak that grows in this ecosystem. The low growth and crooked branches of this tree contribute to the formation of the dense shrub layer. So they all grow very close together and sort of intertwine, making it really dense. Next is another plant characteristic of the scrub ecosystem that sort of defines the scrub. It is the Florida rosemary, or Ceratola ericoides. The rosemary shrubs often form groups where all the individuals within the group are of the same size and age, and this is due to after fires come through the ecosystem, the rosemary has its seeds under the ground and then they all sprout around the same time after the fire, which means they're all going to be relatively the same size and age within one group. My next scrub plant is the Florida scrub holly, or Ilex opaca. These are super interesting leaves. I thought they were really weird looking. The spiny leaves grow almost vertically on the branch, as you can see in the photos. They're almost pointing straight up, and this is actually to direct the water straight down onto the roots of the plant after it rains. Because this is such a dry, sandy ecosystem, the plant needs as much water as it can get. Next we have the rusty Lyonia, which is the namesake of the ecosystem that we went to, the Lyonia Preserve. This is the Lyonia pharyngia. This plant is used by several species, including bees and butterflies that are attracted to the flowers that bloom in the springtime. There are also birds and other small animals that use the fruits as a food source. The next plant that we have is the sand pine, or Pinus clausa. This is also very characteristic of the scrub ecosystem. It's a much lower growing or smaller growing pine, and unlike many other species of pine tree, the sand pine is actually not very useful to the lumber industry, and it is not really harvested for lumber because it doesn't have that tall woody trunk that other pine trees have. My next plant is a little bit different than all the other ones we've seen so far. This is the prickly pear cactus, or Opuntia compressa. This plant is edible. It is said to be both a fruit and a vegetable. The green cactus branches, or pads, are considered to be the vegetable, while the pears that it grows after flowering are the fruits. This cactus is also a favorite snack of my pet tortoise. My next plant is the shiny blueberry, or Vaccinium mercenites. This fruit is a food source for many animals. It is known to attract deer, raccoons, skunks, foxes, and bears, as well as humans, because who doesn't like blueberries? My next plant is a lichen, the British soldier lichen, or Cladonia cristatella. This species was first described by an American botanist who believed that the red tips of the plant were reminiscent of the British soldiers in their Red Army uniforms. I thought these were so interesting and I had never seen them before. The name of them really makes so much sense. They do look like little red hats on the plant. Moving on with my plant species, next I have a wildflower, the blazing star or the Liatris tenuifolia. This is a flower that is endemic to the scrub ecosystem and specifically only occurs on the Lake Wales Ridge. My next wildflower is the slender goldenrod or Solidago stricta. These flowers are important to bees and more specifically the native pollinators of this ecosystem. These are known to produce a goldenrod honey when they flower in the fall. Moving on to my animal species for this ecosystem, I have the six-lined race runner lizard, the Aspidicellus sexlineatus. This lizard gets its name from its ability to run at really high speeds for short distances. They can reach speeds of up to 18 miles per hour. I was so excited to get this photo. I followed this lizard for a couple minutes and was finally able to get some pretty good photos. I was super excited about this. My next animal species for this ecosystem is an insect, the two-striped walking stick or Anisomorpha bupristoides. These insects use a chemical spray to defend themselves from predators. My dogs actually love going after these whenever they see them outside in the yard, and they often end up getting sprayed, so I have to sort of wipe their faces off after that so it doesn't irritate their eyes. You can see in this picture there was actually a ton of these hidden in the palmettos. They were sort of grouped on top of each other. I think these are super gross looking. My last animal species for this ecosystem is probably the most distinctive of the ecosystem, and that is the Florida scrub jay, Aphelocoma coalescens. I don't think I've actually ever seen a Florida scrub jay prior to going out into this field trip. I was super excited to get these photos. This scrub jay let me get super close up to it. These are really beautiful birds. I had no idea what they looked like. This is actually the only bird that is endemic to Florida, so these do not occur anywhere else. Here we have two scrub jays perched up in a tree. Here I have a video of two scrub jays. Our last ecosystem was the mesic hardwood hammock. Here's a landscape photo where you can see how dense the canopy cover is and how it's more sparse on the lower ground level. Here's another landscape photo that again just shows how dense the vegetation is in this ecosystem. The first plant species that I identified for this ecosystem was the pignut hickory, or Caria glabra. Early settlers noticed hogs feeding on the nuts that are produced by this tree. You can see them in the pictures here. That gave the tree its name, and furthermore, the inner shape of the nut actually resembles the snout of a pig. My next plant species is the sweet gum tree, or Liquidambar styraciflua. This tree has many commercial uses. The wood of this tree is often used as plywood, and the resin has been used in folk medicine and can also be found to be used in chewing gum. My next plant is the resurrection fern, or Pleopeltis polypoidioides. These ferns get their name due to their ability to survive long periods of time after drying out. They can resurrect after being shriveled and dry for up to 100 years. You can see them growing on the branches of the oak trees. Next is American beautyberry, or Calocarpa americana. These berries have been used as traditional folk remedy to repel insects such as mosquitoes, horseflies, and ticks. From what I read, it's actually very effective. Also, the berries are such a beautiful purple color. My next plant is the live oak, or Quercus virginiana. These oaks are endemic to the southern United States, and they are known for their lifespans, as they can live for hundreds of years. My next plant species is Spanish moss, or Tillandsia usnioides. Despite its name, Spanish moss is not actually a moss, but it is a bromeliad, and although it densely covers the trees, it is not a parasite and does not harm the trees it grows in. Next I have the cabbage palm, or sable palmetto. This native palm is the state tree of Florida and is the most commonly occurring palm species in the state. Here we have Caesar weed, or Arania lobata. This weed is highly invasive and is known to drive out the native species in the ecosystem. This was made evident when Dr. Clouden told us we could rip it out whenever we saw it. My next plant is the West Indian lantana, or Lantana camara. This is a wildflower. It's a shade-intolerant flower, and thus it grows on the edges of the forested ecosystems. I actually took this photo right on the outside of the path. Next I have Florida ironweed, or Vernonia gigantea. This plant attracts many pollinators, including bees, butterflies, and even hummingbirds. Moving on to my animal species, I have the white-tailed deer track, or Otocoileus virginianus. This is an economically important species as it is hunted for game. Populations are currently stable due to conservation and reintroduction efforts. My next animal is the Florida banded water snake, or Nerodia fasciata pictiventris. This is a non-venomous snake. It can often be confused for the venomous cottonmouth snake. It's a little bit hard to see in the pictures, but you can see the striped tail in the water. My last animal species is the brown anole, or Anolis sagrii. This lizard is highly invasive in Florida. It is actually native to Cuba and the Bahamas, but is now the most common lizard in Florida. In my top photo here, you can see it eating a bug. I was super excited to get this photo.